Hello, I'm Mike Corrigan, and this is the PowerPoint on Chapter 1, The Paradoxes, Oxymorons, and the Myths of Education. We start out in the book on this chapter by discussing the many paradoxes that exist in education. These statements of contrary to received opinion. And, one of the big statements that we came across that really hit a soft spot with us was, should we focus on preparing our youth for a life of tests or the test of life? This compliance, this system of accountability we're held under right now, for a lot of teachers is holding us back from doing both, as we suggest might be the best alternative. Because as we state in the book, we're not against academic achievement or testing kids. It's just when we focus so heavily on that testing, that's when the problems began. So what we would love to see is a system that allows educators to focus on preparing youth for a life of test and a test of life. As to how you can accomplish this, well, many educators have a hard time finding out or figuring out how to do this with all the instruction and curriculum and the pacing guides that keep you so fully focused on instruction, rather than having that time and that luxury to really focus on helping kids develop into great kids, great people, even better students. What we found, and as we explained in the book, is that those folks that have figured out how to balance both, accomplish both, well, most of them, they're not as worried about the accountability. They're not as scared of the test scores, because they know that if they are able to focus on helping these kids become better people, if they're able to focus on helping these kids feel more comfortable in their classroom and more supported, more wanted, then that's when test scores go up. They see this job they have, this role as teacher, as a calling, and not necessarily a career where we have to do A, B, and C in order to keep our job. They're there to make a difference. And you might be one of these teachers as well, and we thank you. But it's either a calling or a career. It's rarely both. In this book, what we're trying to get you to truly embrace is that for educational success to occur, we must first know how our students feel before we can help them perform. Now, for some of you, getting you to see this picture is difficult. We've given a great number of keynotes and presentations to educators throughout the country and Canada. And what we've come to understand is that sometimes it's hard to see outside your own world. So in order to get you to see some of these paradoxes and these oxymorons a little more clearly, we first begin by trying to put you into a state of derealization. That's the alteration in the perception or experience of the external world so that it seems strange or unreal. The reason we do this is if we can get you to see it as a different parallel universe, so to speak, then we can get you to maybe see how silly, how crazy some of these ideas are that we're being forced to work under. What we want to help you fully see is that assessing education multidimensionally can actually provide a more mutually beneficial perspective. So to do this, we get you to take the oxymoronic paradox identification test, which we call OPIT. Now, we've given this exercise to a number of educators, and it's normally a fun exercise. Most enjoy it. You hear a lot of giggles. But every time we do it, we always see a few folks that are a little mad. They read certain things, they might be insulted about it or by it. But the acronym OPIT is fitting because many educators feel like they're in this pit of oxymoronic and paradoxical bureaucracy. And we know you need help in order to be able to see through the layers of red tape and recognize how surreal the expectations have become. But that's the whole point of this, is to recognize the surreal, the strange, and the unreal expectations you're being forced to work under. We hope that you take the time to truly complete the OPIT. Circle those oxymorons, circle those paradoxes. Maybe put a smiley face or a frown face next to those things that make you laugh or feel sad or angry. These are the things that are going to make you start to realize where these true problems already exist. And for some of you, we know that you already realize them completely. and this is kind of preaching to the choir. But our goal is to help you find comfort in. We hope that you take the time to truly complete the OPIT. Circle those oxymorons, circle those paradoxes. Maybe put a smiley face or a frown face next to those things that make you laugh or feel sad or angry. These are the things that are going to make you start to realize where these true problems already exist. And for some of you, we know that you already realize them completely. And this is kind of preaching to the choir. But our goal is to help you find comfort in numbers. And in order to do that, we're trying to help you understand or reframe the business of education. And it might be a little discomforting. But learning is enhanced when these comfort levels are challenged. That's how we learn, is when people challenge our thoughts. And we know that many administrators out there might not appreciate our oxymoronic story, or more importantly, the advertisement for the business of education. But to us, it's pretty accurate. And there is a better way, and we don't have to abandon test scores and our goal of reaching high achievement just because we're trying to focus on a more broader concept of what constitutes good education. What we find really interesting is that you would think, after reading this business of education piece, that most people would be like, there's no way I would work in education. In fact, I've had a few folks outside of education read that, and they've asked, how would anybody actually do this? But what's very interesting to us is that after doing this exercise, and we ask this question, would you invest in education? Would you continue working there? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. Why do individuals still invest in education? And we know why. Because you care. This is the calling that brought you to this point, and you want to make a difference. And even though the system's not working the way you want it to, you're not going to give up. And we appreciate that. And we commend you for it. But what we're trying to show is there are advantages to using other statistical performance or value-added management measures. There's the challenge is to truly become data-driven educators, because what we're realizing is when we rely on one little number or one large number, these test scores, it's not a very accurate number. It's just one little snapshot of one classroom from year to year, and it's not necessarily accounting for everything you've accomplished. And there are better ways to actually measure what's going on in education. When we started out on this journey, let's call it, to truly kind of reshape education and how we go about accomplishing real change in education, we were hired as evaluators by the federal government to come in and study grants that were trying to make a difference. And what was strange to us is that so many folks within the systems that we were working in kind of fought the numbers that we were providing. And at one point we just decided to go back and reinform ourselves of when this whole evaluation of education process started. And that's when we came up with this idea of the courtship of Eddie and Eva, the courtship of education, education, and evaluation. This love-hate relationship between education and evaluation. And how this rise of standardized testing began. And it's an interesting history, as you'll read. But somehow we went from evaluating different aspects, climate and all these different things, to an obsession with one single number. Personally, I believe this courtship has led us to this point where we're at today, and that's how can we demonstrate proven comprehensive school reform? How can we show statistically, with numbers, with data, with evidence, even qualitative evidence, that what we're doing is working and improving day to day? And, as we stated in the book, the Department of Education suggested that this needed to be done and implemented through rigorous, systemic, and objective procedures to obtain this valid knowledge. But where we're at today is we're using these tests that aren't truly validated, and they're not very rigorous. I mean, the tests are rigorous, but they're not rigorous when we look at the scope of what they're measuring within the schools and what we do. They're not systemic in the fact that We're not measuring all the different components, these dimensions taking part in education. We're just measuring a few little things, 4 subjects out of the many subjects we teach. We're not measuring what we're trying to do to help these kids grow and become college ready. We're not measuring a lot of things as our multidimensional assessment will expand upon. And the other thing we're doing is, and I think this is probably one of the biggest downfalls of the current system we have, is we're using this cross-sectional test score data for research analysis, and we're not looking at them longitudinally. And as we explain in there, it's kind of silly to expect that some sort of comparison of this year's kids to last year's kids that we had in our classroom represents anything. It just seems somewhat moronic or oxymoronic, and definitely a paradox as to why we haven't figured out how to actually create a score or an assessment that allows us to see if we helped a student from last year in 3rd grade improve this year in 4th grade. And here's the problem. We've agreed to do this. Somehow, somebody, somewhere along the way, allowed Eddie and Eva to reach this compromise that we'll just use this one test score. And we're not going to use the test score from the kids from year to year to see if we're actually helping the individual kids. We're just going to compare classrooms to classrooms. And as the book shows and explains, and as you probably already know, this is just a shortcoming when it comes to education evaluation. What we're trying to do is get you to expand the view. We want you to use data to improve student achievement. And this is not a new endeavor, as we've found. A lot of schools are doing it. But how can collecting and analyzing data in a multidimensional way become more meaningful to those struggling to meet AYP? Well, the point would be, nearly 38% last year didn't meet No Child Left Behind. They didn't meet their AYP. So there's a great number of folks out there that truly need help in doing this. And it would appear that focusing on curriculum and instruction, or getting new curriculums and putting more instruction and cutting art and gym and all these other courses kids like as well, we're not doing them any favors. We're not doing ourselves any favors. It's just not working to increase. And what we need to do in order to visualize that a little bit more is look at work that's been done that shows how schools that use a variety of data and information are able to make better decisions for improving all programs within the school. And Glickman's research does a great job in doing this. One of the big problems, though, is that most of the teachers coming out of pre-service programs, teacher prep programs, aren't really being taught on how to use data, how to read data, how to understand definitely quantitative data. As the Secretary of Education said, many, if not most, colleges of education are doing a mediocre job of preparing teachers. Colleges of education need to update teacher preparation programs to be more data-driven. And we must expand the view of data to include process, formative, and summative data. We're teaching our students how to use rubrics to see if they learn the lesson plan or these things, but we're not teaching them on how to look at climate. We're not teaching them on how to look at if they're delivering their instruction well. We're not teaching them on how to look at how community engagement, or more importantly, parenting engagement is helping them. There's so much more that we could be teaching pre-service teachers, as well as probably teachers like yourself who are in the field, on how to actually use a variety of data. And that is what this book is meant to do, is to give you a starting point or a jumping off point to visualize this and understand it a little bit more better. That's why we call it data-driven thinking. Well, we didn't want to call it data-driven education because many of you don't like that term. But data-driven thinking to us is, let's just at least think about the data. And maybe it's not the determining factor on what we do, but let's at least consider the data and make it part of our thinking process, our problem-solving process. It's because data-driven decision-making is a process of inquiry, analysis, and decision-making and we have inferences gained from the interplay of this process, formative, and summative data. So what are these three types of data? Some of you might have not ever heard of this. Well, the process data relates to the way school reform or instruction takes place and the processes that occur as leaders lead, teachers teach, and learners learn. This is the data we gather around what we're doing in schools, as educators. How well an intervention is going, how much it's being implemented, to what level it's being infused, to what level the new curriculum is being delivered well. There's a lot of different process data that we could be and should be gathering, but many of us are not. The formative data, a lot of you have this. It comes in the form of these different tests we take throughout the year on the curriculum to see how well the kids are progressing. But there can be more informative data, about students, staff, and community, and perceptions and opinions. We need to gather more of this so that we can actually use it to guide us along the way. Because what we don't want to wait for is the summative data, and these are the outcome measures. And that's what a lot of us are relying upon. At the end of summer, before we go back to school, what we get to see are our test scores and what happened last year. And at that point, we're then going directly into the school year, and we just saw last year's test scores. So we're waiting to the last minute to see if it's good news or bad news or the same news. And what we're trying to say is there's a number of different forms of data that could save us from waiting till this last minute when we're just stuck with the summative data. And quite honestly, if you use the process and formative data correctly, then what we're going to run into is much better summative data if we do it right. So what is multidimensional education? Well, quite simply, it's a lens for you to study what you do that directs your focus to 7 dimensions associated with highly effective schools. As the book explains to you, these are dimensions that have been discovered and rediscovered over decades after decade. And what we're finding is these 7 dimensions, which I'll go through here shortly, are what are truly predictive if schools are going to be highly effective. It focuses on a multidimensional framework rather than on a single dimension, achievement. By this multidimensional education process model that's in your book, what we're trying to show is the approach we're recommending is systemic, not systematic. Now, systemic looks at many parts at one time, where a systematic approach looks at one step at a time. So, for instance, a systematic approach to improving test scores might be to just adopt a new math curriculum. Or maybe you're having behavior issues and climate issues, and you adopt one program like character education or social emotional development, or one of the different programs out there, response to intervention type things. But what we're finding is one doesn't work. It's a combination of all that we do. And though it's hard to truly have a broader focus, to look systemically at what we do, the schools that are doing really well, guess what? That's what they're doing. And the model we provide you in the book, this model here on the slide, we start explaining these 7 dimensions to you. The community engagement, dimension 1, curriculum expectations, dimension 2. Dimension 3 is developmental perspectives, the character of the folks there. Dimension 4 is education attitudes. Dimension 5, the faculty fidelity, how you're viewed. Leadership potential, dimension 6. And then dimension 7, school climate. And what we're trying to show in this chart is that when you improve these 7 dimensions, those arrows point up to academic challenges and academic achievement. And what we're able to do is reduce academic challenges when we focus on these 7 dimensions. What we're able to do is increase academic achievement when we focus on these 7 dimensions. Unfortunately, too many people are focusing on that one little box at the top, academic challenges. And what we need to do is take a step backwards and improve our community relationships, get our parents more involved. We need to improve how our teachers are delivering the curriculum so that they make it exciting and engaging and intriguing so that the kids want to listen to it. We need to focus on the character of the building, and that's not just the kids, that's the staff, as the parents. We need to create rules and procedures that actually help these kids become better people, feel more safe there, want to be there, and be nice to others. Because when we have that happen, we have a great school, and it's more fun as an educator to come to. The educational attitudes improve when we start doing some of these things, and we need to focus more specifically on educational attitudes because, as we explained, motivation and affect, that feeling we have towards school, are two major predictors of how well our kids will achieve. We need to improve our image as faculty and how we're received, if we're trusted or not. And we need to improve the leadership so that we're on the same base. We have a common goal. The communication is good. And that, the leadership in the school is not contradicting what the faculty is doing and vice versa. We need to make the kids just as comfortable with the leadership. And all these combine and touch on school climate. Because if we don't feel safe in a school, whether as an educator, as a parent, or a student, none of these things related to academic achievement are going to improve. It's just too hard for so many to actually learn when the climate doesn't exist for that. These 7 dimensions, I'll just go through real quickly. We encourage you, and we'll teach you here in this book, on how to measure all these different things. But in our measurement that we provide you and that we provide schools, we want you to look at the interpersonal community engagement within this dimension 1. We want you to look at parent involvement, really, really important part here. And we want you to get your kids more involved in service to the community. Because no matter at what age level, this will benefit what we're doing. And we'll expand on this quite a bit, all these dimensions. Dimension 2, we're not looking at the curriculum and how effective it is. We're looking at the perceptions of the instruction and the lessons received. We're looking at the perceptions of how creative your staff is in the classroom or how creative you are in the classroom. We recommend looking at, are you giving enough support to the students? And we're looking at if it's rigorous enough. Is the perceived demandingness of the coursework at the level we need to be, that zone of proximal development, remember with Vygotsky. It can't be too easy, it can't be too hard, but it needs to be just enough for us to help them truly get it. Dimension 3, as I was saying, focuses truly on the character of the building, student success traits, the misconduct, compassion for others, the good deeds. I know many of you focus on misconduct and your data that you collect, but typically it's only data on behavior issues and discipline referrals. And this truly only tells us the evidence of who got caught or who's actually being bad, and that's normally a small percentage in most schools. It's not telling us how the rest of the class, how the rest of the kids are feeling. Educational attitudes is a very, very important dimension as well. We need to look at motivation to learn, personal academic empowerment. These are the things that really lead to higher test scores. If they're motivated to learn and they want to show you that they learned, they're going to try harder on the tests. If they're personally empowered academically and they believe in themselves, they're going to try harder on the tests. If they have a stronger work ethic when it comes to academics, they're going to try harder on the tests. And when it comes to feelings for school, how the student feels about school, or more importantly, how the student feels about the teacher, because let's face it, that's who's held accountable for the score. This is when scores really start to flourish and rise, when we improve those things. Dimension 5, all about teacher trust, teacher satisfaction, teacher belief in students. As the saying goes, they need to know how much you care before they care how much you know. Leadership is very similar. They want to know that they can trust the principal and that the principal is being fair and that the leadership is satisfactory and the communication is good and there's a shared mission and vision between all stakeholders, not just the principal and the faculty, but the parents and the kids. And Dimension 7, a big, big important one, the school climate, these relationships, how much the kids like the school. And a really strange one we've used for a number of years now, school isolation, really tells how isolated some of these kids feel. And this data, when you collect it, will probably blow your mind because it is normally much lower than we would ever expect to see. So many kids just feel alone, as if there's no one there that they can talk to or confide in. And these are things we need to look at, all 7 of these dimensions. Now, we have the next section in your book goes into innovators wanted. And what we're trying to show in this is that, for you to put in place the multidimensional education process, this intervention, this model, because let's face it, the evaluation of your school suddenly becomes the intervention that your school's embracing if you do this. It's not character ed, it's not social emotional, it's not reading first, it's not this or that. It's multidimensional education. It's an evaluation, which is the intervention that's informing what you're doing that'll improve all of your different interventions. But what we have to find are innovators, and hopefully like yourself, that are ready to put this in place. We need to recruit early adopters to support them, and we need to show some evidence to get that early majority on to come with us in this effort. And then that late majority slowly comes on as we go. And then you got these laggards, that often are very resistant to change. But as we state in the book, laggards can sometimes be the voice of reason. So we have to listen to all, because this is a team effort. But we're looking for innovators. This is why we wrote the book. We want people to help us with our vision to help schools. Now we end this chapter with a bunch of myths on how we feel about education. The first myth is educators need to become data-driven. So to improve the approach to data-driven decision-making in education, we need to reassess what data are important to our goals and organize them with a process or framework that makes more sense. Now, as we state, we know you probably already are data-driven. You're probably overwhelmed with data, but what we're trying to show, it might not be the right data you actually need. We need you to actually consider that there might be other forms of data, pieces of data, that can be more beneficial to you. And when we truly become data-driven, when we start thinking data-driven, and we start looking at all the pieces of the puzzle, how these 7 dimensions feed achievement and how they lower challenges, that's when we start to make a lot more progress. Myth number 2 is teachers don't need to be evaluated. It's truly somewhat alarming to Doug and myself as to why so many teachers are resistant to evaluation. I mean, we understand that they don't want to necessarily be held accountable for how kids feel about them. But at the end of the day, we're not quite sure that if 1 visit by the principal or 3 visits by the principal for 5 minutes to an hour a year, or a visit from someone from the district or another peer coming in and writing up a little report are truly going to tell you how well you're teaching on a daily basis. The folks that can probably provide the best feedback on how well you have taught or how well your teachers have taught are the people that have that teacher every day. And that's the students. And we also would think that the parents that are of these students probably have a great amount of information to provide as well. As we explain here, we get evaluated every semester, and there's always a few that are not happy, but there's no reason a teacher should be fired for a few unhappy students. There's always going to be a few unhappy. It's not necessarily if we are being evaluated, it's more about how we use the evaluation. And if we truly want to get better, we need to be evaluated. Even if it's just you as a teacher asking your students to fill out a simple questionnaire on what you could do to improve to help them. This is a small little evaluation. You could send the same thing to the parents and see what they think. But this is the whole point, and this is the graphic in here, is this triangulation. When we look at students, parents, and faculty, that's when we slowly get to the truth of how well we're teaching. And, regardless if you're for teacher, evaluation being a part of this value-added model or not, and if it was, it would need to be a small part of it. If we're going to hold teachers accountable, which we all know there's a few that need to be held accountable. But if you're going to use something like this, we truly need to use it to improve. And it's about applicability and not about accountability. It's how we apply this information to help us get better. It's about how we use this information to help our colleagues get better. Myth number 3, and I won't go into too much detail. I think the book does a decent job in stating our position on this, but the fact that we're actually still shooting for 100% proficiency is, let's just be honest, crazy. It's most likely an unobtainable goal. We need to set realistic goals for the data you use to guide and document your success. But we do need to set a goal, and maybe not 100%, but maybe, 90%. But if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time, as the old saying goes. But what we need to do is set realistic levels of proficiency. It's not always going to be 100%, and what defines proficiency is a whole nother story. But we have IQ that's playing a part in here, as we explain here. We have parent involvement that plays a big role. We have socioeconomic status that plays a big role. There's so many variables that are going to hold back some kids from not being proficient. And not to mention class size and how many teachers and how much support you have. It's a nearly impossible goal to achieve, and we just need to, at some point, start getting more realistic about what we're able to do. And myth number 4, there are 3 kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. Well, we're just trying to show you how to not be afraid of numbers, because we can use statistics as a drunken man uses lampposts for support rather than illumination. Or we can use them to actually guide what we're doing and not worry about what they say, but take them as constructive criticism, or take them as good news that we actually did something incredible, or take them as news that, wow, we need to start all over again because what we're doing is not working. But, the numbers don't lie. It's often how those numbers are used. So we urge you to start getting past this numerophobia that some of you have, because we want to show you in this book that numbers can be your friend, especially if we use more of them. So before you end this chapter, do us a favor and do these first steps. Write up some information on them, pay attention to the assignments that we've posted, and we've hoped you enjoyed chapter 1.